All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending this session, which is the final stretch of the research day with the GVRC. I am Nazsa Baker. I'm one of the postdoctoral fellows here at the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center. And today I will be presenting on regional differences in firearm ownership, storage, and use, results from a representative survey of 5 states. And just want to thank Mike and Ali for allowing me to write on this paper for them that is right now under review. So just a little bit of background. In the US, over 81 million residents own firearms, and there are approximately 393 million privately owned firearms. And as you can see here, based on the photos, handguns are the most common type of firearm that is owned, followed by rifles and then shotguns. And although we have knowledge about this national firearm ownership and its ability to advance it and the capability to advance our ability to characterize American firearm ownership, it's important that we understand how ownership varies across smaller geographic regions. And understanding this will enable us to better capture the differences between communities and inform local policies. So the purpose of the study: the present study addresses each of these gaps by utilizing a large sample of U.S. firearm owners and non-firearm owners from 5 diverse states: Colorado, Minnesota, Mississippi, New Jersey, and Texas. And we also sought to describe the current firearm ownership and the extent to which states differ on domains relevant to ownership, which would include demographic characteristics, the number and types of firearms owned, the reason for ownership, firearm purchasing behaviors, and storage and carrying practices. So a little bit about our methods. So we recruited from a knowledge panel via Ipsos between April 29th and May 15th of last year. And if you don't know, the knowledge panel is just a probability-based web panel that's designed to be representative of the US. And of course, you had to be over the age of 18. And in addition, reside in one of the 5 states listed here. So a little bit about the demographics. As you can see here, based on the beginning of this chart, the study participants were primarily white. And if we move over, a lot of them outside of New Jersey and the other 4 states, living in predominantly rural areas. As you can see, New Jersey is an outlier. A lot of individuals lived in urban spaces. Political beliefs across the board more moderate, and again, across the board, majority of participants working full-time. And this just breaks down a little bit about their household income, education, age, sexual identity. So to move to the most important piece, the results. So sorry about that. So we looked at 3 measures. Again, the first being firearm ownership, and that was assessed via a single item, which we asked, do you currently own a firearm? For storage, we based this off of 2 series of items. First, which of the following storage practices do you use for firearms currently located in or around your home? And second, please use the following scale to indicate how often you utilize specific storage practices. And in order to answer that question, it was just a scale of never, rarely, occasionally, and then moving on to always, and prefer not to answer. And if individuals preferred not to answer, they were excluded from the analysis. And lastly, behavior, 1 item. How frequently do you carry a firearm on yourself outside of your home? And again, using a scale of never, rarely, sometimes moving up to almost always to always. So we first conducted a full sample analysis. So if you see here, based on this, the 5 states differed significantly in rates of firearm ownership. Mississippi reported the highest level of firearm ownership out of all of the other states. Colorado, Texas, and Minnesota, did not differ from one another, but they all reported significantly higher firearm ownership rates than New Jersey. And again, Minnesota, Mississippi, and Colorado didn't differ from one another, but they all reported higher frequencies than Texas and New Jersey, which again, Texas significantly differed from, New Jersey. They all also differed on percentage of recent purchases for whom the firearms was their first firearm ever purchased. And as you can see here, the last bullet states New Jersey reported the highest percentage of firearm owners. About 60% reported their purchasing. They purchased their firearms during that time. And again, Minnesota, Mississippi, Texas, and Colorado did not differ from one another. So here I'm just showing you what the rates look like in terms of firearm ownership. Again, Mississippi being the highest, following firearm in the childhood home. Minnesota, Mississippi, and Colorado were about the same. And again, New Jersey being that outlier because they had a high percentage of first-time ever firearm purchasers. So to be more specific, if we're looking at firearm ownership, the 5 states, again, differ significantly in percentage of firearm owning residents, and again, endorse specific primary reasons for firearm ownership. Safety at home was the most common primary reason for firearm ownership for the other states, while Minnesota reported endorsing hunting as their primary reason. And here, this is what we actually see on this particular graph. So in regards to storage practices, the states did not differ on percentage of residents who reported storing their firearms in a gun safe or unloaded in a closet or drawer. However, the states differed significantly on other storage practices. As you can see here, Minnesota reported a significantly lower percentage when it came to locking devices, while Mississippi and Texas reported higher than other states in regards to loaded in a closet or drawer. In a vehicle in a locked container, Mississippi reported slightly higher than Colorado and Texas. And in a vehicle not in a locked container, Mississippi reported a higher percentage than the other states. And here is the chart for this analysis. All right, so firearms owned. The 5 states differed in average of number of handguns owned. Minnesota residents owned fewer handguns than Texas and Colorado. We can say this is in regards to their hunting culture. The states also differed in number of shotguns and rifles owned. Again, Minnesota residents own more shotguns than residents in any other state, and more rifles than Texas and New Jersey. All right, firearm storage. The states also differed from one another in frequency of storing one or more firearms loaded in a locking device, in place, or in a locked location, as well as the frequency of carrying them. So if you see here, Mississippi and Texas, they stored their loaded firearms more frequently than firearm owners in other states. In regards to a firearm in locking device, Firearm owners in Minnesota store firearms with a locking device in place less often than those in Texas. Firearms in a locked location. Firearm owners in New Jersey stored firearms in a locked location more frequently than firearm owners in other states. And carrying on person, Mississippi and Texas carried firearms more frequently than owners in other states. Now, this could be in regards to their state policies around being able to carry their firearms on them. Okay, so what did we find? So there were three main findings. And what overall, this study sought to, again, characterize firearm ownership, storage, and carrying practices across the 5 states, which would include Texas, Colorado, Mississippi, Minnesota, and New Jersey. We uncovered significant differences in rates of firearm ownership across the 5 states. There was substantial variation across the states for first-time firearm purchases, and we found statistically significant differences in firearm storage practices, reasons for ownership, number of firearms owned, and carrying habits. Again, New Jersey was an outlier. And since firearm ownership in the Northeast is typically lower than other regions, we anticipated New Jersey would report lower firearm ownership than the other states. And as you can see here, the surge in new firearm owners could have corresponded with significant events that happened in the US, such as COVID-19, the murder of George Floyd, and the insurrection at the Capitol. And with that, we will see an increase in new firearm owners. This may contribute to increased risk in the home for accidental shootings, injuries, and suicide attempts. And this is of particular concern in a state like New Jersey, where firearm ownership is already low, which means fewer people may have fewer personal experiences using, carrying, and storing firearms safely. The shift in firearm ownership. So although the primary reason for firearm ownership has shifted nationally from recreational purposes like hunting to self-protection, we see here that our findings regarding reasons for ownership aligned with the more common ownership of long guns in Minnesota, which were mainly used for hunting. And the popularity of owning firearms for hunting signifies this potentially distinct culture of ownership in particularly Minnesota. And also our findings regarding reasons for ownership aligned with the more common ownership of long guns, again in Minnesota, mainly used for hunting. Storage practices and ownership. So unsafe firearm storage practices also vary across the states. And storing a loaded firearm in a drawer or closet was significantly more common in Texas and Mississippi. But both states, these are both states where ownership for self-protection was common. As for Mississippi, that particular state reported significantly higher rates of unlocked storage in a vehicle. This is a dangerous practice that could lead to unintended shootings, violent assaults, and theft. As for the primary reason for ownership in Mississippi, it being self-protection, researchers have found that those who own a handgun for protection have higher rates of suicidal ideation and increased risk for suicide. Firearm behaviors. So states vary considerably, not only in the stringency of their firearm policies, but also firearm behaviors among their residents. For instance, a surge in ownership in New Jersey, where firearm ownership is generally low, this would require consistent outreach and messaging that also provides training assistance, education on safe storage, and information about protecting children in the homes when firearms are present. And As for educational outreach regarding firearm storage, again, may look very different from other states. So as for the second bullet point, in states like Mississippi and Texas, this could be particularly true for storage of loaded weapons in accessible locations like closets, drawers, and vehicles. And another thing we need to think about is a coalition of credible messengers, maybe the most effective for establishing a strategy to communicate to firearm owners across geographic regions. So it's important that there are tailored messages and messaging that account for common practices and cultural beliefs around firearms that are more likely to be effective for encouraging safe firearm practices. And just a few limitations. Of course, the present study is not without any limitations. And despite the listed limitations, it provides a recent and more nuanced look at firearm ownership, storage, and carrying practices across 5 states following a period of significant change in the US and also a new firearm purchasing surge in the country. And it's important that public health messaging, again, relate to firearm safety should take into account regional differences to ensure effective communication, which would increase the likelihood of safe firearm behaviors. And just overall, again, public health messaging is important, and it needs to be around firearm safety and needs to account in for these differences. And thank you very much.